Hi, Kelly Rizzo.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here.
I'm
Chelsea.
always so
Thank
happy to
you.
see you. You're such a sweet person, and you're just so sweet. You have a nice aura around you. I don't really see auras, but you have such kind eyes, and you're always so kind. And I met you obviously through Bob.
Yeah.
But Bob was also that way. Like, he was so kind-hearted, which is why he was so beloved. For those of you listening, Kelly Rizzo was married to Bob Saget for how many years were you guys together?
We were together 6 years, but only married 3.5 years.
3.5 years.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably for the best. I mean, marriages don't really need to go beyond that.
It ran its course. We did the thing. That's all it needed to be. That's really all it needed to be. No, it was cut short. However, it was one of those things where I remember at Bob's funeral or at the after party, Jeff Ross said, he goes, oh, and I don't blame him for saying this, but he goes, Kelly, you got robbed. And I'm like, even then, even the week that we lost him, I was like, no, I didn't.
I remember. No. I don't know where I heard you talking about it, but I remember you.
I had a hard time thinking I got robbed because I felt so grateful for the time I got to have with him. So.
Yeah. And since then, the things that you've done with your grief, which is a real tenet of this podcast, is talking to people about how to deal with grief, how to mobilize out of fear or grief. You have, for starters, you have a podcast, right?
Comfort Food,
which is where you basically talk to someone about grieving over a nice meal, right?
Yeah.
About their grief.
Yeah. I mean, it's a way to make it a little bit more palatable and a little bit more inviting because it's not a fun topic and people hate talking about it. It's still really taboo, which is so strange because we all go through it at some point. So I was like, how can I make this a little easier and a little bit more, fun, for lack of a better word?
Who were the people that helped you when you lost Bob? Like, who were the people that helped put you in perspective? Or was that just something that was innate within you that you were able to have kind of like a...
I mean, it's one of those things where, when you go through something and somebody's like, oh, you're so strong. I mean, I didn't feel strong. I didn't know what I was doing. I'd never been through this before. It was very new to me. Never really lost anyone. And I was very fortunate because Bob had so much death in his life and so much loss that it was almost like I was leaning on him, even though he wasn't here, based on what he had taught me about death and how to get through it. Which is laughing.
Yeah.
And having really good people around you and just understanding that this is life and this is what happens. But to kind of always look at the silver linings. And fortunately, because Bob was such a wonderful, special human, he was surrounded by really wonderful people. So I got through with his friends, his daughters. My sister was the most instrumental person by far. I mean, she slept in bed with me every single night for like 2 months straight. But yeah, his friends, I mean, Jeff Ross, John Mayer, all the Full House people, they really were his family. And so that kind of got imparted onto me because they were so wonderful and they loved him so much that they're like, we're going to be there for her too.
Yeah. And then you started a grief kind of like support group, right? Online.
Yeah. So this is so brand new. So thanks for letting me talk about it. It's called Comfort Club and it's a membership and, just an online kind of support system where it's its own little social media network. So people feel what I've learned in this past almost 3 years now, which is crazy, is that so many people are reaching out to me all the time. And a lot of people feel very, very alone in this. And they don't really know where to go. They don't know, and grief support groups are not really, fun places, I'm sure. It's a lot of people who are in the thick of it, really going through it. And I get all these messages all the time and all these DMs like, I just lost my husband. What do I do? Help. And you can't DM somebody back and have it be really effective. So I'm like, how can I create something that is a little bit more immersive and a little bit more interactive and can really help people and that where they can meet each other and then help each other.
Yeah.
So I'm having great guests on, whether they're therapists or people who I would have had on my podcast, and they come on and talk live to the group and they can ask questions because on a podcast, you can't really, Yours is different because you can take questions, but a lot of times, it's not really interactive.
Right.
So these people can actually talk to the guest, talk to the expert, talk to the therapist, whoever it is. Because, I make a big disclaimer. I'm not a therapist. I'm just here to help facilitate this community. So
I do the opposite on my podcast. I pretend I am a therapist and that I have a medical degree, that I have a PhD, that I am a certified board
pharmacologist.
I'm a gynecologist. I'm a pharmacologist. I'm whatever you need me to be. I'm actually none of those things, but I do pretend that I am because I feel like all of the things that you learn when you go through something difficult and you lose somebody and you go through the proper channels of therapy and grieving are such valuable lessons. It's so important to impart that to other people who are struggling. And, grief isn't necessarily doesn't only have to do with us losing someone. Right. That's the most obvious way to be grieving. But, people are grieving this election. People are grieving, losses of relationships when people don't die. There's grief everywhere.
Job, divorce, relationship. Friendships. People grieve friendships. So I also am very specific about that. Like, this is not just if you're lost a spouse or lost anybody. This is for any type of, or some people I have some people that haven't really had a specific loss, but they're like, I just want a good community that's comforting. I'm just having a tough time and I just want to meet some great people.
Well, you talk so much about grief and loss on your Instagram and your other, you're on your podcast. So it seems like a natural progression from the sorts of conversations you're already having there.
Yeah, and it's so strange because, you just said that going through things does kind of give you this expertise in a sense, but I still always feel like I'm not an expert. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Like,
but I think people are always just looking for some support, like a ballast. And because you've gone through something, you do have something to say about it. And you do have your personal experience to draw from. And that is valuable, especially when somebody needs a reference point or a perspective. And it's always helpful to be able to talk to somebody who's been through something that you're going through. So it doesn't matter if you're in expertise, like you become an expert in humanity, and wanting to actually make other people feel better and less alone. I think that's what it really comes down to. It was even when you're going through the depths of your despair and loss, it's like you're not the only one. Someone else lost someone. There's millions of people who are losing people every day, and for some reason, there's comfort in that. There's comfort in knowing that there's a sheer volume of people who may be going through a similar experience.
And I think because it's also very unusual to have to go through it publicly. Usually, that's not a thing that typically people have to, if you typically lose your spouse or something, you do it privately. And because everyone loved Bob so much, I felt that there was this, I almost didn't need to help keep his legacy alive because he does that on his own, but because he was such a special 1 in a billion person. I'm like, I owe it to him and to myself to do everything I can to share about him. And while doing that, I started talking a little bit more about the grief stuff too. And then people naturally were like, hey, help me, or I want more of this. And I was like, oh gosh, like normally I talk about food and travel and music. Mm-hmm. I'm like, so all of a sudden now here I am talking about grief. But when I saw that was actually helping people, I'm like, okay, this needs to be more of the direction I go in. So
yeah. And so how can people join this group?
It's just comfortclubonline.com. And it's just, a membership that, there's different live events every month. I do a comfort food Sundays every month where I do live cooking. So for, people get the Sunday scaries. They don't want to be alone on a Sunday. And so here we'll cook a recipe that we can all cook together and then eat dinner together virtually.
That's sweet.
And then, it's only been a little over a month, but it's been really wonderful so far.
I love that. I love that.
Thank
and
you.
So I want to just honor Bob for a little bit because since
my
you were
favorite
so
thing.
Tell me what's some of the things that made him so unique and special to you and to the world?
Well, it's so interesting to say this to a comedian because a lot of people don't understand this about comedians. But comedians are incredibly deep and incredibly complex and have usually gone through a really tough time, which is how they became comedians.
Incredibly deep.
Incredibly deep, incredibly complex. And Bob was just this mix of, he was hilarious, but also insanely neurotic and also so giving and nurturing and helpful and thoughtful, but also so needy. I mean, he was just everything. And it was truly, I certainly did not go into this before I met him thinking like, oh, I'm going to end up dating Bob Saget one day. Like, that was just so strange. It was, when I first met him, it was such a foreign concept to me. I was like, I can't like Bob Saget. That's so weird. Like, that's that Danny Tanner guy. Like, that's so weird. It was so bizarre to me. But then I slowly started to realize, I'm like, I will never, ever meet another person like this in my entire life. He was just the most unique, special, hilarious, introspective, deep person who just truly cared so much about the people in his life, and also just cared about that was his last big hurrah, where his last tour was called I Don't Do Negative. All he wanted to do, it was a tough time in the world, and he just wanted to make people happy. And that's all he ever wanted, was just to make people happy. So
I think the thing that stands out most to me about Bob is his enthusiasm. He was so enthusiastic. Anytime I saw him, he was like, oh my God, Chelsea, tell me everything. What's going on? Like, so excited to see you. And it wasn't just me that he was like that with, obviously. That's what he exuded to everyone.
And it was so genuine.
Genuine, right. It wasn't full of shit, and he wasn't jaded, and he was never a negative guy. Like, there was, I don't know if he had a dark side to him. I mean, I guess we all do. But as far as male comedians go, he was, one of the least dark comedians that I've ever met.
Yeah. It was more like personally, just because he always felt the weight of the world, and he had so much loss in his own life. He did have, and when I say a dark side, I don't mean, where he was like secretly, off like yelling at people or something like that. I mean, it was more, he would just feel sad, and he just wanted to make people happy. And so he was always struggling with like, oh God, like the world can be a tough place, but all I want to do is help people. And, at the same time, trying to be a good dad and balance with his work. And, even though he, was an actor and a producer and a director and all this stuff, like being a comedian was what made him the happiest. So.
Yeah. And you're still very close with his girls, obviously.
So close.
How old are they now?
They're all in their 30s. So almost 32, 34, 35, and 37.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was nice because, I never wanted kids. Well, I didn't think I wanted kids. And then I ended up not wanting kids. And which is, well, and it was kind of he's like, at first he kept the option open, and then he's like, I can't do it. And I was like, I don't blame you. I wouldn't want to be pushing a stroller. I don't want to push a stroller now, let alone at 70.
Right.
And it was great because I had these 3 incredible stepdaughters
Well,
that I just got to like drink martinis with. I didn't
That's
have to
awesome.
change diapers.
I mean, that's really the way to do it, is to get into some sort of step parenting situation if you must, because that can pay such dividends too, to joyfulness and happiness. I have lots of stepchildren in my life.
Well, I will say that you being so outspoken about being child-free inspired me to also be more outspoken about it, because it is something that's a little taboo also. And you always talking about it in the way that you do, in such a hilarious way, which I can't do that. But, it just made me much more open to talking about it more and trying to normalize that a little bit. Mm-hmm. Because it's weird that it's not as normalized.
Yeah, I know. It's weird that what's weird to me is for any man to think that we all automatically want to be mothers. It's like, excuse me, where would you get that fucking idea?
Yeah, it's really crazy to me, because it is something that, like, when you were, let's say, 15, did you think you wanted, or did you know from a very early age?
It was like, wait, this isn't something I would ever want. I don't want a newborn baby.
I never
breastfeed.
wanted it. And being pregnant always terrified me. And I never even when I was a kid, I was like, I don't really like being around kids. But I just still thought that I would, because it's just what you do. It's just kind of the way of the world. And so I was like, oh,
Which is what they're counting on, everyone. They're counting for us to think we're supposed to do what we want, we're supposed to do things and not think too much about it. Think about it.
I know. And it got to the point where I was like, wait, I do have a choice in this? That's crazy. Interesting. And then when I met Bob, at first I still kind of wanted the option. And then he's like, no, I can't do it again. And then I was like, all right, well, choice made for me, because it reminded me always of that Sex and the City line with Carrie and Charlotte when Charlotte's like, I can't believe you're going to give up a baby for a man you hardly know. And she's like, why would I give up a man for a baby I hardly know I want? And I was like, mic drop, end of story. I was like, that's it. So I was like, I'm not going to give up this wonderful person for something I don't even think I want.
And so now you're dating someone else. Can we talk about who you're dating?
Yeah.
Brecken Meyer, who's an actor.
Yes.
I've known him for many, many years.
Yes.
And we were all at the Sarah Silverman party recently
He says
together.
hello.
I say hello back to Brecken. He's a sweetheart. That's a big
so
height
wonderful.
disparity, by the way, between Bob and Brecken.
It is. But Bob was also, he surprised people with how tall he was. Nobody thought that he was that tall until they saw him in person.
How tall was he?
6'4".
Okay, yeah. That's tall.
Yeah. But it's so interesting because they do have a lot of similarities. They're both incredibly devoted fathers, and they're both probably the two funniest people I've ever known. But then they're also different in so many ways. And it's great because, I've joked about this in the past recently, is that I feel that Brecken is the only person that Bob would be okay about. He would not want me dating anybody, but he's like, oh, if it's going to be somebody, fine. At least it's Brecken, because he really loved Brecken and respected him. But they weren't really close. It would be weird if they were really close, but they were close enough to where they really, really liked and respected each other, but not best friends.
And you clearly like to be with funny men.
Apparently, now looking back, I'm like, how did I ever think that was a non-negotiable? Like that's mandatory. It's must.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really nice to be around a funny guy.
It is.
That's very
everything.
helpful.
Yeah, we just laugh all day, every day.
Okay, we're going to take a break and we're going to be right back with Kelly Rizzo. And we're back with Kelly. Okay, we're going to take some callers. We're going to give advice. We're going to give out comfort.
Okay, so I'm pretending I'm a therapist. Okay, here we go.
Exactly. So Sandi says, Dear Chelsea, in 2012, I lost my beautiful 16-year-old son. I spent the next several years participating in weekly grief support groups where it wasn't uncommon for people to express their guilt and dissatisfaction for the type of memorial service they were able to provide for their loved one while in the depths of their grief. It bothered me that A, people's lives were not being appropriately honored, and B, grieving people were feeling badly about this, on top of all the emotions that come along with grief. So 5 years ago, I started an event planning business specializing in celebrations of life. This work taps into a perfect combination of my life experience, my education in psychology, my organizational skills, and several of my creative talents. I'm known for hosting the best parties, and I have a deep compassion and unending patience for people in the depths of grief. The trouble is, since this is a unique business model in the United States, I'm afraid that I'm a bit ahead of my time. I'm an introverted creative type who is uncomfortable selling myself and have been struggling with figuring out how to reach people who need my services. After some slow periods last year, I incorporated planning other types of events into my business. I've heard you talk about your preference for celebrations of life over funerals on past episodes of Dear Chelsea, so I thought I'd ask you for your thoughts on this career path I've chosen and desperately do not want to give up. Because truly, no one needs an event planner more than people suffering from grief. Am I too ahead of my time for this endeavor? How do I lead the way into establishing new norms for celebrating our dead in a society that doesn't seem quite ready to think outside the box? I'd love your input. All the best, Sandi.
Hi, Sandi.
Hi, Chelsea.
Hi there. This is our special guest, Kelly Rizzo, with us today.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi, Sandi.
I love that idea. I mean, that's what we had for Bob, right? A celebration of life.
Yeah. I mean, I just have to say that is the most incredible idea I have ever heard. And I can't tell you how incredibly valuable that would have been for me at the time. I was incapable of doing anything, but I also fortunately didn't have to do anything because a lot of people stepped up. But there, to me, is such a need for that. And for you to even feel the slightest bit of negativity around that, I hope that you can embrace it fully because it is so needed. It is so important. And I've never heard of anyone doing that. So to me, it's like you're kind of one in a million.
Yeah, it feels like a service that will help many people. I think it's just a matter of you getting the message out there. It sounds like. So what is your where are you? What's your business strategy? What have you been doing thus far?
Well, like I said, I did have to switch to adding more events to my repertoire and just offering my services to a wider scope of events, which has been fun. But my heart really is with the grieving. So after the pandemic, I was slammed with work. I had a bunch, and then it just suddenly dropped off. And it wasn't even people who died of COVID.
And where do you live?
I live in Bellingham, Washington.
Okay. And so how are you marketing this?
Social media mostly. I've reached out to other event planners to let them know that I specialize in this in case it's something that they don't want to take on. I have, all of the funeral homes know that I exist. I've pretty much covered everything that I can think of.
Well, what about advertising with the obituaries?
People don't really do obituaries very much anymore.
Do they? I guess not in the hard papers. They don't do them online.
Yeah, not very often. They are done through the funeral homes. And honestly, I'm kind of in competition with the funeral homes, so they don't,
I would say I would think I think obviously you want to broaden your social media advertisement as much as you can by spreading the word and having people who have used your business continue to spread the word, but also going to kind of making sure that your messaging is in temples and churches and congregations that are in your area to let people know that there's another option other than a funeral, organizations or even retirement homes going into there. Have you done that?
Yeah.
There might also be an opportunity, sort of a business to business opportunity, talking to elder law and estate planning attorneys.
I did that as well.
Did you already?
I saturate. Yeah. I sent out marketing materials to all of them. Yeah.
It may be a little bit more of interacting with them on a personal basis, like calling, having a meeting, sitting down, talking to them a little bit about why this is something somebody might want to include actually in their estate plans. Because marketing, it's so, like you said, outside the box for people in the US that it might take more maybe you are having events and speaking for 15 minutes about why you feel like this is an even better way to celebrate someone's life.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, if you could do that, if you could talk to people's families at a retirement community, or you go in and you talk to all the people in the home, how do you want to be celebrated when your life is over here? Do you want to have a funeral? I'm here to offer something you really do have to kind of, have a conversation with them about it. I think that's how you get people to kind of convert to the idea of not, a funeral is so funereal. It's so depressing. Right. There is an upbeat, more positive way of looking at transitioning out of life. And even talking to people, in hospitals, who are dealing with difficult decisions and stuff like that. But I feel like retirement communities are just so if you could talk to the people that are there, and if you could talk to family members of the people that are there to give them the option, because I'm sure it's more, everyone has to either bury or cremate somebody, right?
Yeah.
So there's that cost anyway. But what are your costs kind of commensurate with the cost of a funeral of your?
Yeah. And I've had to keep them that way, even though what I create is far better than what the average funeral is. And I'll tell you what I have found is elderly people, they have their plans kind of set in place, and a lot of them don't want anything. And they also have lived long enough that a lot of their friends are no longer here to participate. So those aren't really the people that have hired me. It has been people who have lost somebody tragically, suddenly, unexpectedly, far too young, who are just wiped out by grief and need somebody to step in and celebrate. I've helped celebrate some pretty incredible people in some pretty incredible ways. So it's been, it's all been just a learning curve, because there's no, literally, I think there's 5 businesses in the entire country that do what I do. And I was one of the first. So, and none of us are getting very much work.
Yeah. Well, isn't one of the big,
just a really new concept.
Sorry, isn't one of the big selling points also that a funeral is usually within a few days to a week or so after somebody passes, where what you're doing kind of gives them more time to prepare and to plan something. Where a funeral, I mean, you're so rushed, and sometimes you're like, I mean, for instance, Bob and I never ever talked about what he wanted. Fortunately, obviously with his family and everything being so involved, like we did what we think he would actually really have loved, but we never talked about it. So I didn't know. And we were so rushed, everything happened so quickly that you're like, oh God, am I doing this right? What am I doing? To where your services, you can have much more time to prepare and do it right and do what you think the person would really have wanted.
And I do always encourage my people to try not to rush it. There's some who just need it to be over with, but for the most part, people want to take the time so they can get used to the idea that they need to do this thing. And the more time I have, the more epic I can truly make the event be for them, and really dig into who the person was and find ways to reflect who they were in this celebration that we're creating of their life. And everybody loves the events. I've had families tell me that, they were absolutely terrified and dreading coming to their person's celebration of life, but felt an overwhelming sense of joy and love when they left. So it's really it's kind of a magical service that I can provide for people. And beyond just creating the event, I know what grief is like, and I provide support and let them know that they're not crazy while they're going through, what they're experiencing, sometimes for the first time in their lives.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll help you promote it on this podcast. What is the name of your business?
Epic Celebrations.
And you service anywhere in the country, or is it just in your area?
I generally work between Bellingham and Seattle.
Okay.
King County, excuse me. But I am certainly willing to travel for my services.
Yeah. Well, I think, I'm sorry we don't have a better business strategy for you, but we will try to spread the word over here, because I think that is the definite way to deal with a lost, losing a loved one, especially in a tragic way. You don't, you want to go out with remembering all of the beauty that they brought, and kind of having a more modern way of looking at death, rather than death being the final, and such an ending and such a smack in the face. And especially for people who lose loved ones unexpectedly, that's exactly what you need, in the face of that.
Yeah. Well, I will definitely keep it in mind too, since I deal with a lot of grieving people all the time.
Yeah. Good. Well, I think it's just really important to I appreciate the opportunity to put the idea out there in a larger sphere, so people are thinking about, different ways, and that there are people who can help in that. And just to start thinking outside the box of what, how we celebrate the lives of our people once they're not here.
And also, another way to kind of maybe outreach for you to do is, people are able to get euthanized in Oregon. So if they're planning that, and Washington, right? Oh, right. Yeah. So, I mean, is there any way to kind of couple your services or with those programs that are actually, because those people know they're going to die, and that's kind of what they
can be around for their celebration of life.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of the services that I offer, you spoke with Katie Couric about this on your on a previous podcast, which was part of what led me to contact you, was she talked about the idea of living memorials for when somebody is sick and know they're going to pass, and then having a celebration when they have all of the people around them who can hug them and love on them one last time, so that they leave this world feeling full of love instead of fear. And
that's really beautiful idea too.
So, and that's one of the services I offer, but haven't been taken up on that one yet.
Okay. Well, I think it will happen. I think people will come around to this idea. It's you are a little ahead of your time, but that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. What are the other events that you're doing to supplement your company?
I've done some corporate events, and I've done some baby showers. So it's been kind of fun to work on the opposite end of things.
Yeah.
I did some birthday parties, and it's been really joyful to actually get to meet the people that I'm helping plan parties for. I tend to fall in love with the honorees that I create celebrations of life for, and then I don't get to meet them. I just have to find ways of bringing a piece of who they were into me and holding them in my heart, even though I never get to meet them. But it's pretty heartbreaking to know that I've missed out on knowing some really, really cool people in this world.
Yeah.
The circle of life, the whole spectrum.
Well, good for you for doing this work. It's really, really meaningful,
Yeah, thank you.
And
Thanks
Sandi,
for bringing attention to it.
Yeah, Sandi, so tell us one more time. It's epiccelebrations.com?
Epic Celebrations NW for Northwest.com. Yeah.
All right, great. Well, let's also offline a little bit more about potential B2B strategies. I'd like to hear kind of like what all of you tried and offer some suggestions for more stuff to try.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Sandi.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Right.
That is a really cool idea.
Really cool, right?
Yeah.
I just feel like getting that idea in front of people in a way where, obviously you don't know if somebody's going to have a sudden death, but where it's sort of like they remember like, oh my gosh, there's a woman who came and spoke at such and such like 2 years ago, and she would be perfect to jump in and help out with this.
Yeah, well, now I know about it. It'll be on my radar. And yeah, as you said, she's a bit ahead of her time, but there's also very little competition. So
yeah, right, exactly.
It's also nice for people who have a terminal diagnosis to make this kind of plan. You know, people who know that they're, not going to make it, and they can plan either like life celebration before they pass on, or employ her to actually make their funeral something that they're going to want to be at, you know?
What do you think about that? Where you're like at your own funeral almost?
I mean, I'm down for that.
Great.
I don't know. I don't
part
mind
of me is like,
that
that'd
idea.
be amazing. The part of me is like, oh wow, that's.
But I definitely
like you always have those dreams of like being at your own funeral, like what that would be like. Like would anybody show up? And then it's like you get to see who shows up.
Yeah. I like the idea of a celebration of life for sure, because I don't want a funeral. I want a party.
Yeah, but it's a little easier to party while the person's still there.
Yeah, or have a party in my honor without me. I'm fine either way.
Yeah, and there'll just be plates of drugs everywhere.
Yeah, plates of drugs, mushroom, ecstasy, all of that good stuff.
Our next question is not about grief, but this comes from, they're using the pseudonym Spiraling. Dear Chelsea, I'm a 40-year-old woman who recently moved to a new city and state. I really enjoy playing tennis, and since moving, I've joined some leagues that have been meeting a lot of people. Last Sunday, I was playing tennis with one of my teams, and I think I overheard our team captain talking about me to another teammate. She said about me, "She doesn't look like she'd be good, but she is, right?" I cannot stop thinking about it. I've always been self-conscious, so the comment cut really deep. I don't think the captain was trying to talk bad about me. I actually think she was trying to say something nice about me, but it's really caused me to spiral a bit. She also doesn't know I overheard her. I mean, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just focus on the good part and not on the looks part? Any advice? Sincerely, Spiraling.
We were talking about dark, your dark side. Like we all have a shadow self. And our shadow self is, some psychiatrists refer to that. Some people is like, oh, it's just your ego. However you want to frame it, we have voices in our head that are telling us one story, and then there's reality. And the reality is that she was giving you a compliment, and who gives a shit what she thinks about whether or not you look like you're a good athlete or not. The compliment is that you are. And she's surprised. That's all her business. Like, it's none of your business. But the thoughts that you're having that are related to this are your insecure thoughts, your ego thoughts, your shadow self thoughts. That is your job to quiet those thoughts. And that is through like daily work to understand that other people's opinions of you don't matter. They're not your business. And sometimes even when they tell you about their opinions of you, it doesn't matter. You're not, as long as you're not hurting someone's feelings, or be acting in a destructive way towards yourself or for others, or towards others. Like, that is work you have to do on yourself. And that can be daily affirmations of all the things that you see about yourself, that you are strong, that you are capable, that you're active in your sport, and all of the other good things that you have in your life, or a gratitude journal, writing down 10 things that you're happy and grateful about. You just kind of have to get to a little bit of a higher frequency than to let all these little comments from other people that you weren't even supposed to hear in the first place. Remember, you weren't supposed to hear that in the first place. If she had a choice to say that, knowing you would hear it, she wouldn't have chosen for you to hear it. Therefore, there's nothing for you to do about it. You're definitely not going to say anything to her about it, who cares? You don't want to, like, that's aggravating an issue. But I think all of our negative self-talk, like, that is a daily exercise that you have to recognize that you're doing, and now you recognize that you're doing it. I'm telling you that you're doing it. You wrote in because of this. And you have to start to disassemble that. And every day is like, I am not what other people think about me. I am what I am. And you're contributing in a valuable way to something that you really enjoy. That's your takeaway, not the negative thing. That is meaningless to me. So while I know it's difficult to hear things about yourself sometime, I really just would want to implore you to like dig a little deeper into who you really are, the essence of who you are as a person. And then you become a lot less affected by what other people think of you. And that can work with meditation too. You can achieve that goal through meditation, through gratitude lists, through affirmations every day. But I would pick one of those things and really focus on doing that activity every single day to just kind of bring yourself up a little bit more so you're not as vulnerable to others in things that are not that important.
Yeah, you nailed that 1000%. I mean, I was just thinking the same thing. Like, what other people think of you is not your business. And it can be hard, of course, to, you hear something gossipy and negative. It sounds, it's a high school thing, it's that thing that you would let consume you when you were younger. And it can be hard to, if you hear somebody saying something about you. But as you said, she wasn't meant to hear it. It was ultimately a positive. And didn't she say, like, I'm not even sure she was talking about me. Let's just pretend she wasn't even talking about you. It wasn't even about you. Mm-hmm. Just pretend that you didn't even hear it because it wasn't even about you. It could have been about somebody else. You don't know for sure.
That's true also. But yeah. So just work on your stuff. Work on it. It's you have to, like, we all have a responsibility to each other as women and as human beings to get better at being ourselves. But, we all have a responsibility to kind of improve our own mental health and our own mental self-assuredness. Like, our self-assuredness is like, you have to be aware of your behavior and then, oh, look at what I got hurt about, like, oh, that's me being silly or insecure or small. Never mind. Wipe that away. Like, let that, like, it's like water off a duck's back. Just like let it fall off of you and actually physically think about those comments falling off of you, because that's something that I do a lot and it works. You just think about the fact that, okay, I sat with this emotion. It didn't feel nice. And now I'm letting it go and moving on.
Well, that's good. I like that. Envisioning the water off a duck's back.
Mm-hmm. So Luke says, Dear Chelsea, I'm a 34-year-old single gay man, and life has been equal parts horrible and generous to me. I met my husband online when I was 17. He was 18. There wasn't a weird age gap. Even talking about it now, I want to pull younger me aside and say, oh, honey, you have so much time to fall in love. Don't rush it. Well, we rushed it, and I rebelled against every piece of guidance my family had to offer. We got married and never looked back. We both ended up being successful in our careers and built a great life together, and then he died in a car accident. I was and still am completely devastated, and this was 4 years ago. 3 months after he died, I learned that I was the sole beneficiary of a $1 million life insurance policy. That policy has since paid out, and I donated a large chunk of that to charities that I know he loved. The rest I invested. As you can imagine, his family is coming out of the woodwork with their hand out, and my inclination is to tell them to fuck off entirely. What are your thoughts? Thank you, Luke. This is tricky.
I mean, I don't think it's fair to have to give handouts to everybody in his family if those were his wishes.
Yeah.
Is it the insurance policy or was it a will?
It's an insurance policy.
Oh, I see. So that is a little bit different. What do you think about this?
An insurance policy is a very deliberate, very calculated situation. Like he set that up for him. It wasn't, this wasn't like a probate situation where he died and left a bunch of money and it's like, who does it go to? Well, they were married and the family's like, well, what about me? We're his family. This was a very deliberate situation. Obviously, if it was a different type of inheritance, that maybe is a little bit more disputable, but I feel like a life insurance policy is just very specific.
Right. And I think to me, like my big question is, what kind of relationship did you have with them before this? You know, did you have a good relationship with them? Were they people that you saw at, Thanksgiving and holidays and this sort of thing? Or, are you just hearing from them now? I think that makes a big difference in sort of the answer to that question.
Yeah, but it's also not your responsibility to be doling out. Like, we're talking about $1 million. And while that may sound like a lot of money, that goes very quickly, when you start giving it away to different people. And as you just said, like, that insurance policy is not set. An insurance policy is not set up for your other family members, like your brothers and your sisters. It's set up for your partner. That's what it is.
Right. And so, it's not coming from his bank account.
It's not like...
Right, it's not like this is his money he worked for his whole life and he's leaving it all to him. Like, this is insurance money.
Right.
So I would, I don't know if you're feeling really guilty that you want to give them money. That's really a personal decision. I don't think you have any obligation to do that. And yes, are you in regular communication with these people, or if they came out of nowhere? If they came out of nowhere or you hadn't heard from them for a while, one more reason to not worry about it. But I wouldn't let yourself be racked with guilt. You were in that relationship for a really long time, and I believe that you deserve that insurance policy.
And I will say that you are not alone in this. This is so common and is almost a little bit more the norm when somebody passes away and there's, whether there's a step situation and exes and all this stuff and children involved, that it usually can be very messy and it usually can create so many problems. I was so fortunate that we had none of that, thank God. But that's not the norm. My situation, we talk all the time. We're always like, we are so lucky that we didn't have that type of, because a lot of times when somebody passes away, it is just a catalyst for your worst self to come forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was just with a friend on vacation who was dealing with this, and I could not believe the stories. I was just like, oh my God, money brings out the worst in everybody,
My family is all in elder law and estate planning. So like, everybody go get your estate plan done, because that, when you do pass, you can make these choices before any of that happens. You can say how you want things to go, and nobody has to argue about it.
Yeah, I've done my estate planning. I just re-upped my estate planning and make sure that my cousin doesn't get to make medical decisions in my favor, because she'll keep me alive no matter what. And I was like, listen, bitch, I have another cousin that will euthanize me. And so he's going to be the one that has the medical decision making. I don't want to fight anything. I'm ready. I'm ready to go if need be.
All right. And, one other thing that Luke brought up when we did sort of a pre-interview call was being a very young widower is something very unique or is uncommon. Would you have any words of advice for him?
Yeah, just knowing that you feel like when it happens to you that you're the only one, because you're like, oh my God, I was not planning this. I was anticipating that. I mean, in my situation, I knew that I'd probably be a widow maybe in my 60s or 70s, but I certainly wasn't anticipating it at 42 when it was 3 years ago. And I will say, when you go through it, you start, like, so many people start to come out of the woodworks, and you do have such a support group of people that you meet who they're like, I'm a young widow too, or I'm a young widower also. And I've met so many people who have, and then you feel less alone. And it sounds like this was 4 years ago. So, it's really tough, but if he can find that support from other people who have gone through it at a similar age, you do feel alone, but you're not alone. There are so many people.
And it's really important not to let people put guilt on you, like, you don't, I know you might feel like that's a natural reaction to them coming and saying, we want money too, or whatever they're doing. Like, you can't let people guilt you into things. You have to kind of really sit with this decision and think about what's right for you and what's appropriate for you. And that is appropriate. Insurance policy is for the partner. That's appropriate. So anything, other complicated feelings you have around it have been brought on by his family. And so I want you to be very aware of that and where the feelings of guilt are coming from.
Yes, you've done absolutely nothing wrong. it's hard enough to go through the loss of the partner without all of this other stuff. And a lot of people who aren't in your shoes and who haven't experienced the loss of a spouse and how absolutely gut-wrenching it is, anyone else, it just goes back to the whole, when someone is grieving, there's no wrong way to do it. You can't judge them because if you haven't been through it, you don't know what it's like.
Yeah. All right, Luke. Well, check back in with us. Keep us posted. And we can take a quick break and come back with a kind of silly little question to wrap up.
Perfect.
With.
Let's go. Let's end on something light today. It's been a bit heavier. Okay, we're going to take a break and we'll be right back with Kelly Rizzo. We're back.
We are back. Well, I identify with Cindy here because, being a Midwestern kid, as I know you are, Kelly,
yes.
Our families are a little more conservative when it comes to what we do with our body modification. So Cindy says, "Dear Chelsea, I'm in my 30s and recently got a little lip filler for the first time.
Go, girl.
I'm happy with the results, but I find myself constantly afraid of being judged by my friends and coworkers. I also live far away from my parents, and I'm dreading their reaction. They screamed at my sister when she got her nose pierced, so they definitely don't like body modifications. My fear is that my parents will be disappointed in me for changing the features they gave me, and I don't want to break their hearts. Do you think I should give my parents a heads up about the filler, or should I just act normal and not say anything when I finally see them? Thanks so much for your advice, Cindy."
I definitely don't think you should give the heads up to anyone about anything. Like, it's really not their fucking problem or their business. And if it's noticeable enough, like if it's a big change from how you looked before, then I think you should go in there with like a plan about why you did it, of explaining to them. I mean, explaining to them that it was important for you and that this has been something you felt insecure about and that you've seen everybody else. Everybody fucking does this. Mm-hmm. Everybody does it. I've done it. Like, it's okay. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, whatever's going to make you feel better. First of all, your lips get thinner as you get older. So like, there's that. Men's get thicker as they get older. So how that happens. Fair. It's like, but also like, whatever you need to do to make yourself feel better, who gives a shit? Like, you don't owe them an explanation. And if it's not noticeable enough, they probably won't even fucking notice. So I don't know how much you got done, but like, everyone is doing this, and that's it. You always wanted bigger lips. That's all you have to say is, I wish I had bigger lips. I've always wanted bigger lips. Can you believe how lucky I am that they provide this? And you could just go and get it done. I didn't have to get surgery. I didn't have to go under the knife. I didn't have to do anything drastic. I just got a little lip injector that will dissolve if I don't like it. I mean, Life is a miracle.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you completely in that you're an adult. You're in your 30s. I understand the still appreciation for what your parents think, but it's one thing if you were like in high school and they're like, I'm not going to pay for college if you do this. Okay. It's like, you're kind of still under their thumb. Like, you can't just go out and do that. However, I mean, I come from a very different, like, my mom lived in the Playboy Mansion in the 60s. She's like, when I had like my nose done and my boobs done, she was like, you go girl. Like, she loved all that stuff. But then again, like, they hated all the tattoos. I have so many tattoos. And my dad is, born in Sicily, very old school Sicilian, and would freak out about them. But I still just didn't care. I'm like, they're still going to love me no matter what. Mm-hmm. They're not going to, disown me. And they get over it.
They'll get over it.
Yeah.
They might be mad for a few minutes. And we're like, why'd you do that? 5 minutes later, they're not going to care. So just, you're building this up too much. They'll get over it.
Yeah. And it's the way you feel isn't silly. That, that's not what I'm trying to say by this is a silly question. But like, if this gives you confidence, that's the thing that matters. And I do think that's true. Like, parents sometimes are like weird about something like a nose ring, but like not about, hey, your lips look a little bit different.
But also just come from a place of like, when you do deal with it, like, your enthusiasm has to override their criticism. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm so happy I did this. Thank goodness this service is available. Thank God I can afford it. You can just pop into someone's office and do this. Like, oh my God, I'm so grateful. Like, you have to overshadow their pessimism or negativity. And with the fact that their daughter's happy that she made that choice.
Yeah, like I feel good about myself. And if you want to be mad at me, but I'm sure you'll get over it and we'll have a wonderful holiday season.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Cut to, I want to see a before and after picture. Okay?
Yes,
Let's be real.
Please send that, Cindy.
Okay, so Kelly, thank you for coming today. So listen, people, if you want to be in a support group for grief or, probably other things too, I imagine it will expand beyond just grief, right? You can go to comfortclubonline.com, and then you can also tune into Kelly's podcast, which is Comfort Food, which is available on
anywhere you get podcasts,
which is also about grief and handling grief with a little bit more support and more comfort. Over food, and actually using it as a guide to not even for yourself if you're necessarily going through grief, but if for someone that you love is going through grief, figuring out a better way to be available for them.
Exactly. And it's just really great advice for not only how to get through it yourself, but how to help people going through it in your life. Because if we haven't gone through it yet, someone we know has gone through it or is going through it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Chelsea.
Yes,
so
it was lovely to
wonderful
see you. Yeah, always, always. Okay, we'll see you guys next week.